Let's dive into a hot topic. Nvidia and AMD can ship AI chips to China, but there's a catch. 15% of revenue goes to Uncle Sam. Is this smart leverage or a security own goal? Stick around to see who really benefits from these pay-to-play export controls.
Moving forward, we got a lot to cover on this week's version of the 5 things. We're actually getting a bonus thing, so welcome. Don't think we're liars here in the sense of we're just giving you extra value, 20% more on this week's version of the 5 things. Very rare. But Gary, next we're talking about Nvidia. We've got a 15% tariff on both Nvidia and AMD for their exports to China. Thing number 2, paying to play Nvidia and AMD's China chip sales agreement. What do we need to know here, Gary? What does this mean for domestic manufacturing, taxation of exports? Tell us everything we need to know.
So, Rob, the history here is actually really complicated. Right now, the United States makes the best AI accelerators in the world, and there's nobody even close. NVIDIA is clearly the global leader. AMD is making better chips all the time. And China wants to also be a leader in AI, and they want to import those chips. And it's been a source of political contention. Now, what happened was the Biden administration said, well, okay, NVIDIA, you can export to China, but not your very best chips. You have to cripple them. And what NVIDIA did was very clever. They technically complied with the restrictions, but were basically shipping chips to China that were this close to their very best chips. They weren't crippled nearly as badly as the administration had asked them to do. So the request wasn't phrased correctly. Then what ended up happening was, at some point, the Trump administration said, okay, hey, we're stopping this. You can't export to China. You can't export even those crippled chips, which were still pretty good. What then happened was the Trump administration entered into negotiations with China, and China said, hey, we'd really like to have those chips from NVIDIA. By the way, wouldn't you really like our rare earth elements and magnets that you need for your technology, your automotive business, your weapons guidance systems? And basically, they had what we wanted and needed. We had what they wanted and needed. And the president said, okay, NVIDIA, AMD, you can go ahead and start exporting to China again. Again, not the very best chips, but the ones that are slightly less good. Now, worth pointing out, along with all of this, China had a long history of cheating on this. They were importing chips from Vietnam. There was some city in Vietnam that bought more chips than they had electric infrastructure. They were buying timeshare, right? So people were, they built their AI data centers, and China was just leasing this. I mean, the whole thing was kind of ridiculous. So we weren't really stopping them from getting the chips. Anyway, so what happened was President Trump said, okay, you guys can start shipping. And then he went to NVIDIA and AMD and said, hey, surprise, if you want to ship to China, you have to pay the government a 15% export license. This is different from our tariffs. Our tariffs are a way that we charge companies from other countries to import to the United States. If you want to sell in the US, you're going to have to pay. That's what the tariffs are doing. This is something else entirely. This is saying to our companies, if you want an export license, then you have to pay 15% of revenue.
Got it. And Gary, in terms of the deal, I mean, what do you see in terms of, does this set precedents for similar deals that are going to be moving forward between these chip manufacturers? Do you like this deal just in general? Where does this position us, the United States, as well?
So the fact is that NVIDIA and AMD, they can stomach it. They can handle it. Their margins are enormous. And while a 15% revenue cut for them is significant, these AI chips have gigantic profit margins. They can manage it. But that said, I hate this deal. I despise it. It's terrible. And here's why. At DKI, we've been much more positive than most on the Trump tariffs. And we've understood all along the trade-off of national security and influence over China. we also understand more than anything else that in the United States, we've spent 40 years selling off our manufacturing capacity. That's not sustainable. We need to be able to make things here in the US. We have to be able to produce more than, just financial services and producing dollars, right? That doesn't work long term. And so, we've been more positive than most on that, but this is not a good deal. And the reason for it is because the last thing we want to do is penalize American companies for exporting. That's how we build manufacturing capacity. That's how we build design capacity. That's how we end up at the top of the AI infrastructure play that's going on. Now, if somebody wants to say, well, it's dangerous to let China have these chips, then a 15% tax on Nvidia and AMD doesn't fix that. If the chips are dangerous to send, we shouldn't send them at any price. If we're going to send them, we shouldn't cripple our own national champions. And my fear on this is that this could be used as a precedent for other industries. Now, the reason Nvidia and AMD can manage it is because nobody else has other options. You can't go to other companies and say, hey, you can't go to Qualcomm and say, can you replace Nvidia, right? Intel can't replace Nvidia. Certainly Samsung can't right now. They just don't have the design capacity to do it. They don't have the ability to do that. But what if we go to some of our other companies where there are competitors in other countries? That becomes a problem. Then we're crippling our own companies. That's the last thing we want to do. What we should be doing with our policy is encouraging American companies to produce and export. That's how we become more wealthy and more influential as a nation. That's the soft power that we should be using. So we've been generally supportive of the Trump tariffs, but I hate this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right too, just in the nature of AI and what's happening in this tech space, right? Is the boom is just happening at a rate that accelerated, and then this compounding infrastructure, information gain, right? Data explosion that you're seeing with AI. And then you're exactly right. It's like you're building that infrastructure that eventually is just going to overtake you, right? Because it's going to be so much more powerful and greater than you are with all those exports. So interesting stuff there, Gary. To keep it going, this is this week's version of the 5 things, where we cover everything you need to know in the markets. We're covering everything from our own portfolio positions, big macro concept, educational topics, you name it. Head over to our website, deepknowledgeinvesting.com. You can grab a subscription for free, be added to our mailing list. And then for a premium subscription, gets you access to all ungated content, $100 a month. Basically everything Gary has to say and his knowledge and expertise on things he's seen.